Hey there, YouTube and Wooper Club fans. It's me, Fruit Taco, coach of the Route 1 Burbs. I'm getting over the big virus, but I am healthy enough to at least finally bring you some coverage of WCL Season 14. The playoffs. The playoffs are here. That's right. We got the quarterfinals this week. 8 teams enter, 4 will move on, 1 will eventually be the champion. And this week we've got the 4th seed Terrifier Heatwave going up against the 5th seed Waterdeep Wobbuffets, who are your defending WCL champs. They are the underdogs by seed, but defending champs, can they move on and hopefully defend their title, and make it back-to-back championships? Or will the Heatwave crush those dreams right here in the quarterfinals? Well, let's just jump into it and see how everything goes. The Heatwave are Iron Bundle, Spectrier, Iron Valiant, Mousehold, Palmot, Hisuian Arcanine, Deoxys Defense, Shiftry, Corviknight, Swampert, and Amoonguss going up against the Wobbuffets with Cyclizar, Sneasler, Screamtail, Latios, Manaphy, Galarian, Moltres, Glamora, Rillaboom, Heatran, Empoleon, and Scrafty. Looking at the speed tiers, it's actually pretty close between these two teams. The Heatwave do have the 2 fastest Mons in the match, but they do have to be plus speed natures to outspeed the fastest Mon on the other side, that Cyclizar. We've got a tale of Quark Drive boosts for the Heatwave versus the more likely Unburden boost from the Sneasler on the Wobbuffet side. Both have good Tailwind options as well as priority. I think the Heatwave have the edge overall with kind of more speed on their offensive pieces, but it's definitely all going to come down to investment, and the Wobbuffets can certainly compete in the speed game. I wouldn't count that as a big win for the Heatwave here, but they do have a little bit of an advantage there. Looking at the rest of their matchup into the Wobbuffets, well, the Wobbuffets have a lot of defensive coverage, but Fairy, Fighting Ground, and Ice are all solid targets. Iron Bundle looks really good with speed and super effective stab to hit 7 Mons on the other side with just Hydro Pump and Freeze Dry. Iron Valiant, I think, also looks quite good with Fairy Fighting and then Psychic coverage hitting 8 Mons super effectively on the side. Spectrier, Palmot, Mousehold, Arcanine, there's actually a lot of viable offensive options here, I think, depending on what you expect the Wobbuffets to bring. Defensively, I expect to see Swampert as an answer to Heatran, along with probably Amoonguss to be eating those big wood hammers that we've seen the Wobbuffets throwing out all season, but I definitely expect the offense to be carried by those Quark Drive future Mons. For the other side, the Waterdeep Wobbuffets looking at the Heatwave. Well, the Heatwave definitely have easier types to exploit. Fire and Flying each have 3 weaknesses with only 2 resists, but 4 more types with only 2 resists means I think there's a lot more room here for some neutral offense as well. Latios, Sneasler, Heatran, and Rillaboom I think all actually have really nice offensive utility here. Moltres is also interesting as 2 out of the 3 dark resists on the side of the Heatwave are weak to flying. Definitely expect to see the Rillaboom and Heatran core here that the Wobbuffets have been loving all season, maybe with something like a bulky Manaphy to round out that classic type core, and then, of course, Unburdened Sneasler combined with Grassy Slide as options to hit those Quark Drive Mons and get the speed advantage. Overall, I think this is a really close match. I mean, both teams are well built with lots of good looking options in this match. While the Heatwave have slightly better speed, the Wobbuffets have better defensive typing. Really, I think in all aspects, I think these teams are closely enough matched that the differences really can easily be overcome through prep, team building, and play. And when it comes to prep, Steve Chuck, the coach of the Wobbuffets, is definitely one of the most meticulous in the league. So if I have to pick a side, I think I'll back the Wobbuffets here, but the match could definitely easily go either way. I think both teams have a good shot at this one. But let's see what they thought of their matches and what they are bringing. The Heatwave are going to be starting us off with Swampert. We've got near max HP, near max special defense with a little extra investment in physical defense, and then leftovers for that passive healing. Tera Dragon will let it resist grass, water, and fire moves. Flip Turn and High Horsepower are the stab moves of choice, with Knock Off for utility and Protect. The investment here lives things like Timid Latios' Draco Meteor after you've Terra'd into Dragon, but I think it's more likely just, here as a nice specially defensive check to things like Glamora and Heatran. This thing takes 50% max from +1 Modest Meteor Beam from Glamora, so this thing is definitely looking at walling those special attackers and hitting back into those 4 times ground weaknesses. think the moveset is nice as well. Flip turn giving nice pivoting, high horsepower hitting those big ground weaknesses I mentioned. Then you've got knockoff for utility and hitting Latios switching into either stab. I think you could make an argument for Ice Punch over knockoff though, as it still hits Latios while also hitting things like Rillaboom and the many Tera grass options that the Wobbuffets have loved to bring all season. Aside from that nitpick though, this set looks nice with consistent utility in the matchup. Moving on to more bulk with the Amoonguss, max HP, roughly evenly split defensive investment is going to end up with a bulky set that somewhat favors special defense like that Swampert. Tera Water will give it good defensive typing that resists fire attacks, although it will become weak to the grass type Rillaboom, who it's normally a great answer to. Citrus Berry and Regenerator should keep it going up for a while. Protect, Rage Powder, and Spore utility moves with Pollen Puff as the only damaging option. I really love this moveset. Protect and then two really strong pieces of Disruption paired with Pollen Puff, which can heal an ally but also hits Rillaboom, who you wall really effectively, as well as Latios, who's one of your biggest threats, super effectively. I think this is a great moveset. I'm excited to see what it does in the match. Next, we're looking at that Hisuian Arcanine. We've got heavy attack and speed investment with a jolly nature and some HP investment as well, outspeeding the modest Manaphy, Timid Glamora, and Jolly Rillaboom options on the other side. Tera Water will let it resist water-type attacks, and then we've got a Covert Cloak as the item to be immune to things like Fake Out. Flare Blitz and Extreme Speed attacking moves with Snarl for special attack drops alongside those Intimidates, and then of course Protect. I see where this set is coming from. With your investment, you outspeed fast Rillaboom and have a 56% chance to OHKO max HP Rillaboom. Extreme Speed is going to get good chip on things like Sneasler, and you've got ways to drop both attacking stats, which is pretty nice. Fire is not a great attacking type into the Wobbuffets, though, aside from that Rillaboom specifically, who will be hard to land a Flare Blitz into. And with the relatively little investment in bulk, I don't know how many stat drops you're going to be able to stick around and spam. It's not a bad set by any means, but it's the first one I'm seeing here that I could imagine not being particularly impactful, especially when it's taking the spot of something like Iron Valiant, which we're not going to see on this team. Coming back from that brief offensive detour, though, we're back with the Corviknight max HP with more mixed defensive investment, but this one's going to tend on the physically defensive side. Terra Dragon will resist electric and fire moves, while Mirror Armor is going to reflect stat drops, and Rocky Helmet is going to punish physical attackers, adding some extra utility to the set. Brave Bird Stab with Body Press, probably mostly for that Heatran, U-Turn, and then Roost as the last move. This set takes just under 50% max from Adamant Sneasler's Close Combat and less than a quarter from Rillaboom's Choice Banded Woodhammer, doing 70% plus back to them with Brave Bird solidly covering those two physical threats on the other side. And at the same time, it has an 80% chance to live the initial hit of Modest Magma Storm from Heatran and then hit back for about half with Body Press into offensive sets. And it only takes 25% from Magma Storm if it tears into that Dragon type to resist it. This is a nice defensive set with some good utility. The investment does a good job of covering multiple big threats and being able to at least chunk them back for big damage. Unburdened Sneasler or a Surprise Scarf could be a big problem for this team, though, I think. So I think I'd have put Tailwind over one of the last two moves. I mean, I guess your attackers are still going to get smacked by a Banded Grassy Glide regardless, but I think I'd still bring it to cover those scenarios. However, the moves picked here are all good ones. Moving on to Iron Bundle, max a special attack Timid with enough speed to outspeed max speed Cyclizar and then everything else along with it, with the sizable leftover EVs in HP. Terra Ice will remove its weakness to Grassy Glide, and Expert Belt will boost its stab moves into 7 of the 11 Pokemon on the other side. Freeze Dry and Hydro Pump are those offensive moves, with Icy Wind and then Protect to provide some additional utility. This set is really good offensively, OHKOing most anything it gets a super effective hit on if it Terras. Icy Wind is the thing I'm not so sure about on this set. I mean, yes, I did just say I wish Corviknight had some speed control, and now I'm questioning Joyce here, But I don't know, I think Flip Turn would have been really nice. Freeze Dry and Hydro Pump are so good here. I'm not sure how often you click Icy Wind, and while yes, it could slow down something like a Choice Scarfed Mon switching in, if you think something is switching in, you have two moves that can hit whatever it is hard anyways. I mean, this seems like a contingency move more than for general utility though, so if he uses it, it'll probably be for a pretty specific purpose, and like I said, you could flip turn out, predicting a switch, but you have two moves to hit anything that's switching in anyway, so I think it's a pretty minor nitpick, and this Mon looks pretty dang good in the matchup. And then we're going to have last up Spectre, almost max HP with a lot of speed and timid nature to outspeed the whole other team again. Some extra investment into each defense and then an assault vest, going to make an interesting bulky Spectre set with no special attack investment. Mudshot is going to cover the 4x ground weaknesses, Shadow Ball is its stab option, Snarl gets you some special attack drops, and then Draining Kiss is super effective into all of the ghost resists on the other side. This is a wacky set. Lots of bulk is going to let you take several hits decently. You take about 75% from Banded Grassy Glide and about a third from Timid Magma Storm, while your base 145 special attack is still going to let you do solid damage. I think this is really banking on picking up a KO on a chipped Pokemon to get the Grim Neigh boost and then last as long as possible throwing out those Shadow Balls, which is an interesting strategy. I think it will all come down to getting that boost though, and while this takes special hits quite well, especially paired with Snarl, it will get smacked by the physical mons still, so interesting to see how it plays out. Overall, though, this is a really interesting team. I'm a little concerned that it doesn't have a strong offensive identity apart from Iron Bundle. Spectre and Arcanine are strong Pokemon, sure, but most of the sets this team is bringing are bulky rather than offensive. Again, the Wobbuffets who this season have typically played a solid, bulky game while getting chip and positioning a big sweeper. I'm just not sure this team has quite the punch in the right places to break through that before something like Sneasler gets an Unburden boost and starts going to town on them. They certainly could, but this is definitely a team that's going to be having to out-pivot and play around the Wobbuffets options, which they have been doing. The Wobbuffets have been doing a really good job themselves of doing this season, so we'll see how it works out for them in the match. On to the Wobbuffets. You see they're bringing Rillaboom right there in the front. Max attack adamant, enough speed to outspeed something speed creeping Cyclizar after getting an Icy Wind Drop on that Mon. And then the leftover EVs are going to go into HP. Tera Grass and Choice Band boosted Woodhammer and Grassy Glide. U-Turn and Dray Punch then for some extra options. This is a really solid set. Grass isn't great into the Heat Wave, but it's not bad. We've got a lot of neutral targets to hit, and Grassy Glide easily OHKOs Iron Bundle. Drain Punch's only utility is really into Corviknight, and I think I might have gone with Knockoff instead to also be able to hit into a Mungus a little bit better if you need, but really this is Grassy Glide spam or Woodhammer if there are some speed drops all the way, and I think that has a pretty good chance of working decently for the Wobbuffets in this match like it has all season. Heatran is up next. Max special attack modest with basically max speed and a Choice Scarf conveniently outspeeds anything just barely outspeeding Cyclizar. Tera Fairy will let you resist fighting moves and get rid of your ground weakness. Magma Storm, Heat Wave, and Flash Cannon stab options with Earth Power coverage for that Arcanine. I like this set a lot. The Scarf letting this get the jump on Bundle barely creeping Cyclizar could be a huge swing in the match, and Magma Storm is a good chance to OHKO even without the end of turn chip. And in the utility of outspeeding other offensive mons, and this is just a great bring. Personally, I'm a Fire Blast over Magma Storm kind of guy for the extra 10% accuracy, but that's just a personal preference. I know Steve loves to hit or miss his Magma Storms, so we'll see how they fare for him in this match. Going on to Glamora, max special attack timid with enough speed to outspeed something speed creeping max speed Heatran. Focus Sash this time instead of Power Herb this week is going to, with that Tera Grass, going to let it resist a ground move, give it some little bits more staying power in this match. And then we're going to see that Focus Sash because it's actually Hazard Spam with Spikes, Rocks, and Toxic Debris Toxic Spikes, and then Spiky Shield, and lastly Power Gem for a little bit of offense. This is a big departure from the Meteor Beam set that the Wobbuffets have been favoring. Hazards have definitely been more niche this season, so I wouldn't expect the Heat Wave to bring premium removal outside of maybe Corviknight trying to defog away grassy terrain, which would be really niche. Rocks are great against Iron Bundle, and Corviknight is the only thing immune to spikes, so this could be really effective in chipping things down for the offensive mons to finish off. Probably won't do much of anything besides set up like 2 hazards, but just doing that could be pretty good, and with that Focus Sash, this should do a pretty good job of getting at least those things up, and then paving the way for those other offensive pieces. Pieces like Sneasler, max attack, adamant nature, almost max speed, with some HP investment to outspeed things, speed creeping, max speed, Manaphy. You can see that the Wobbuffets are really playing that speed game, looking at exactly what do the Heat Wave need to outspeed, what is the bare minimum they need to outspeed key things, and then trying to outspeed those targets. Grassy Seed is going to trigger Unburden and boost Acrobatics, with potential Tera Flying boosting that move further. Close Combat and Dire Claw stab options with Protect as well there. This looks like a great set. Dual Stab hits everything at least neutrally except for Spectrier and Amoonguss, who definitely don't want to take a Tera Flying Acrobatics. The defense boost from the Grassy Seed is also nice insurance against extreme speed from Arcanine, although if you wanted to get really spicy, you could have gone with Substitute over Protect to block Intimidate as well. Overall, though, I think this is a great set, and again, I love the attention to detail that Steve Chuck is paying with these speed investments, not just looking at what he needs to outspeed, but looking at what his opponent needs to outspeed, and playing that mind game of, well, if I think they're going to invest this much speed, I can creep them just that little bit much more. Moving on to Latios, max special attack timid with a lot of speed to outspeed anything outspeeding the next slowest mon, which is Manaphy. Soul Dew is going to boost Luster Purge and Draco Meteor, while Tera Electric Tera Blast hits Corviknight, the only mon that resists the dual stab of Dragon and Psychic. This is a solid offensive set with super effective coverage for both of the Dragon resists. Tera Blast is an odd choice though, as Latios learns Thunderbolt, which is a stronger electric move and doesn't require Tera to hit the Corviknight. I think a fast Icy Wind or Tailwind would also be nice here to reliably let Rillaboom outspeed some things, but Tera Blast gives you an option besides Heatran to break through that Corviknight, and your stabs are really good in the match too, and it's not like needing to rely on a Grassy Glide over Woodhammer is that terrible of a fate. So aside from the choice of electric move, I think this set looks really, really good. And last up, we have Manaphy. Max HP and physical defense with an Assault Vest for an all-around bulky set. Tear Grass will let it resist electric and grass moves, potentially targeting it. Icy Wind, Scald, and Knock Off make a very disruptive set with Flip Turn to pivot into the big threats. This is another great set from Steve. Icy Wind to help with some of the potential speed on the other side, counteracting things like Quark Drive speed boosts, or just bringing things under the speed of things like Rillaboom and Latios. The bulk is great, taking less than half from even modest Iron Bundle's Freeze Dry or Arcanine's Head Smash. I think this is just a great set to support the pieces and play into that speed and disruption game. I really like what the Wobbuffets came up here overall with kind of the entire team. Excellent prep with that speed investment, taking advantage of specific matchups while maximizing the use of EVs elsewhere. And I really think that they could get a big KO early with that Scarfed Heatran and thoroughly control the matchup from there. No safety goggles could make Spore a bit of a nuisance for them, but this is a great team, and I really expect it to perform well in the match. But speaking of the match, well, nothing left to do but get into it and see how it all went down, so let's hop to it. So, looking at the team preview here for the Heat Wave, there's no Ghost Resist on the other side, which means I think Spectrier could snowball pretty quickly with that bulky set if it can get an early KO. I think it's also definitely going to be important to quickly deal with that Rillaboom so that Iron Bundle can get to work in the back half of the match, in which case it looks pretty dang good, as long as we can account for things like that Sneasler getting its Unburden boost. For the Wobbuffets, well, Latios looks amazing with Corviknight being the only resist on the entire Heatwave side to both Dragon and Psychic in this match. Scarfed Heatran, I think, could definitely get a nice early KO to get big momentum on the side of the Wobbuffets. You know, bulky Manaphy could also set something up like that up with that Icy Wind. for some big early KOs. So we'll see how both of the teams play this match. For the leads, we're going to see Arcanine and Spectre leading into Latios and Glamora. I think this looks like a pretty good lead for the Heatwave, who have big, super effective damage into either slot from that Spectre. Arcanine could potentially Extreme Speed to guarantee the KO on the Latios and get Spectre a Grim Nay boost as well, but of course it is going to be worried about damage coming into it. And while the Wobbuffets do get some free hazards here, Latios is definitely going to be afraid of that Spectre. Arcanine is going to switch into Corviknight to dodge potential Earth Power, while Latios protects, and then Snarl will break the Glamora Focus Sash in exchange for some spikes. Latios is going to switch into Manaphy, but the surprise Mudshot gets the 80% chance to KO Glamora for a Grim Nay boost. Then U-Turn is going to reveal the extensive bulk on Manaphy, as Amoonguss and Heatran are going to come out. I think this is a little bit of a risky send-out by the Wobbuffets, as Magma Storm does 75% max to no bulk Spectre, and you just saw Mudshot on the set. I mean, maybe it's a plan to double out on a Mudshot while getting an Icy Wind off? I don't know. This is a pretty risky play here, although they do, of course, threaten big damage onto that Amoonguss. Protect from the Amoonguss, and then Heatwave is going to reveal the Choice Scarf on that Heatran, as well as Spectre's bulk, while Snarl and Icy Wind are going to get some stat drops. I don't really agree with the Snarl play here from the Heatwave. I mean, sure, it covers a switch out and could slightly mitigate Manaphy trying to set up here, but Shadow Ball is just a much better middle ground, I think, doing at least half to anything on the field or switching in. Well, of course, Mudshot is an almost guaranteed OHKO onto that Heatran unless it has an Assault Vest, which is possible, but still, I think you just have so much more to gain here from that turn, clicking Shadow Ball instead of the Snarl there that they went for. Turn forward here comes the switch to Rillaboom, who is going to take big damage from that Shadow Ball, but then big damage back from a crit knockoff onto that Spectre, missing the 81% chance to KO, and then Manaphy will go to sleep. Getting the damage on Rillaboom here is great for the Heatwave, and not getting the KO off the critical hit puts the Wobbuffets in a little bit of an awkward spot. They can't go for Grassy Glide into Spectre without risk of getting KO'd by Amoonguss. Rillaboom is EV'd to just outspeed Spectre, though, if Spectre is EV'd to just outspeed Cyclizar. Of course, that's something that you've prepped for, but it is a risk that you'd have to take. Probably one they have to take, though, because they need that Rillaboom for things like Swampert, and letting the Spectre just get another huge Shadow Ball off, I think puts the Wobbuffets really far behind and makes it really hard for them to come back in this match. So I think they have to bank on their prep. And it pays off, outspeeding Spectre by 1 point this turn to KO with U-Turn, and then bring in Heatran in, taking the Pollen Puff easily, bringing the Wobbuffets right back into this match, and we're going to see it's going to force in the Swampert. Latios switches in for Heatran to dodge a ground move, as Manaphy is going to get the one-turn sleep and knock off Swampert's lefties before flip-turning into Latios, bringing out the Iron Bundle before Amoonguss will put the Latios to sleep. Heatwave took back the momentum a little bit here with a nice sleep onto that Latios, and of course threatening big damage into either slot, or really anything that wants to come in from that Iron Bundle. Hydro Pump into the Latios, predicting the Heatran, but still doing solid damage. And then Icy Wind is going to slow down Iron Bundle before Manaphy will go to sleep to another Spore. Not wanting to be smacked if Latios happens to wake up here, as well as covering a Heatran switch. Bundle's going to switch into Swampert, but another one-turn sleep lets Latios absolutely chunk Amoonguss, who will eat its berry, and then heal up the Swampert that came in as the terrain ends. Rillaboom switches in for Manaphy there to reset the terrain, and Corviknight comes in to save Amoonguss from a potential psychic attack, but Latios is going to protect itself from the knockoff from that Swampert. The Wobbuffets do threaten super effective damage into either slot, including Latios' Tera, but both Heatwave Pokemon could Tera to resist that damage, so I think it'll be interesting to see who commits a Tera and where this coming turn. Tera from the Latios as well as Corviknight means that Tera Blast is resisted, and Woodhammer will destroy Swampert, but take Rillaboom out with Recoil before Brave Bird may be originally targeted into the Rillaboom. It's going to be resisted by Latios, bringing it to just above a third, and we're going to see Sneasler and Arcanine replace the Fallen Mons there. Getting the Intimidate boost on, the Intimidate drop onto that Sneasler is nice. Sneasler is an interesting play. With the Unburden boost, it outspeeds and KOs Iron Bundle. But after Intimidate, it's not going to OHKO a defensive Arcanine. Heatran easily KOs Arcanine and Amoonguss, but would need to hit Magma Storm and either live the turn or get a roll to KO Iron Bundle with it. Sneasler, I think, was definitely the more reliable call, but I could definitely see an argument for saying Heatran here as well. Just interesting to look at the different options for the Wobbuffets there. Protect from Latios is a little surprising, but Protect from Arcanine saving it from close combat is less so, as Corviknight attempts to U-turn into Latios. It was interesting here. Draco Meteor was basically a free KO coming from that Latios here, although Amoonguss could just barely live, and by protecting, you left Sneasler open to take almost 90% from a potential Brave Bird. Max Attack Extreme Speed does have a chance to KO Latios from there, so I guess that's what the Wobbuffets were scared of or scouting for, but man, imagine if instead of that U-turn, the Corviknight had Brave Birded the Sneasler for absolutely huge damage there. We're going to see Amoonguss come in to easily take the close combat meant for Arcanine, as now the Draco Meteor is going to come out and KO the Corviknight. That is going to let the Iron Bundle come in here. Latios is going to switch into Manaphy rather than try for the max roll Luster Purge to KO Amoonguss, and Sneasler's close combat, of course, is going to go into Iron Bundle's Protect, which means that Sneasler gets put to sleep by Spore. So many Spores coming from that Amoonguss this game. Just some wrong predictions made by the Wobbuffets here, though. I mean, it's hard. Do either Pokemon Protect? If it lives, who does Amoonguss put to sleep? Hitting Acrobatics into Amoonguss would have been absolutely huge, but unfortunately that's not what they went with. For the Heat Wave, I think Rage Powder into Hydro Pump would have KO'd Sneasler. Of course, only if it hits. But, you know, I don't know. I just don't think either team maximized their turn here. But it looks like a pretty free turn for the Heat Wave coming up. They've got two sleeping opponents, and we'll see what they can do with it. Sneasler is asleep. Hydro Pump will connect to KO that Sneasler, as Manaphy doesn't get the first turn wake this time, so both it and the incoming Spore do nothing. Arcanine is going to switch in for Amoonguss, seeing the Heatran, while Iron Bundle will protect, and we see the Heatran lock itself into Heat Wave, and Manaphy wakes up and gets off an Icy Wind here. That's pretty interesting. You know, I'd say, looking a little rough for the Heat Wave here. The Latios in the back is really just waiting for Iron Bundle to get its speed lower from that Icy Wind. And if Bundle gets smacked by Heatran, it's not going to really be able to beat Manaphy, so I think that's kind of what the Wobbuffets were going for. Lower the speed on that Bundle, chip it to where it can't do a whole lot. It can't live against this really bulky Manaphy. But I think it was a little bit of a risky play from the Wobbuffets here, instead of just trying to go for bigger KOs, going for that Heat Wave, which wouldn't have KO'd either of them. Turn 16 here, though, Heatran is going to switch out into Latios as Arcanine protects, and Hydro Pump will take out Latios, while Manaphy tries to scald Arcanine, who protects. Another Iron Bundle Protect here, though, to scout, and the Magma Storm actually comes out into the Arcanine, but Snarl will connect to drop Heatran's special attack, trying to let Iron Bundle live an attack next turn, although Scald will then take out the Arcanine, and we've got 2v2, last Pokemon on both sides here, seeing who is going to come out on top this match. Magma Storm does hit, but Iron Bundle misses the Hydro Pump before going down to a follow-up Scald and the passive damage, although Spore does put the Heatran to sleep, and while Heatran is asleep, it's just a matter of time before Amoonguss goes down, and the Wobbuffets will end up winning this game. Had the Hydro Pump hit, it would have been pretty close. The burn would have still KO'd the Iron Bundle, assuming it got the burn. But then you have Amoonguss against Manaphy, neither of them being offensive sets. Amoonguss can put Manaphy to sleep, but needs roughly 10 Pollen Puffs to KO Manaphy. Manaphy only needs about 6 knockoffs to KO Amoonguss, but of course it'll be asleep some of the time. I'll save you the full breakdown, but assuming average damage rolls, and we're not talking huge damage rolls either, we're talking, 1 to maybe 2% on some of the bigger damage rolls. But we will see that the math says that with those damage rolls, to win the 1v1, Amoonguss needs 7 sleep turns on 3 spores, just above the average 2 turns of sleep per spore. So with a ton of high rolls, Amoonguss can maybe KO in 9 Pollen Puffs, but the same can be said for Manaphy's damage rolls, or a Hail Mary Scald Burn if they randomly go for a Scald instead of the optimal knockoff here. Of course, they could try going for Icy Winds, because they don't know that the knockoff is technically the stronger option here, and then there's only a 55% chance that no crit happens in that time span, so man, it for sure would have been a nail-biter. But numerically, the Wobbuffets did have a little better than a 2 and 3. A little worse than a 2 and 3 chance of getting through that with the Manaphy the Amoonguss 1v1. So Hydro Pump may be mattering, but maybe not. But really, a great game from both sides. Great teams from both sides. But in the end, it came down to what I said, the meticulous prep work from the side of the Wobbuffets. Those EVs, that planning for the exact speed that you thought the other side was going to hit, and then EVing and creeping their creep, that was just what pulled them out the game. Because early on with that Spectrier, if that Spectrier had a couple extra points and ended up outspeeding that Rillaboom, it probably would have been over for the Wobbuffets. I couldn't see them coming back from taking another big damage there. But the prep paid off, and the Wobbuffets take the game, move on to the semifinals, maybe the finals. The beginning of the season, they had called for a rematch in the finals of last season's finals against the Bouffalant. We'll see if it happens, but congrats to the Wobbuffets, but great game from the Heatwave, and thanks to you all for watching. You can like, comment, subscribe, make sure you know what's going on with the channel, because I will be doing coverage of the rest of the playoffs coming up soon. Got semifinals and then the finals to crown a champion. Could it be the Wobbuffets? Well, we'll see, and I'll see you in the next one.